The cantina on Vex Station buzzed with nervous energy as 36 of the galaxy's most feared beings gathered around weathered metal tables. Smoke from exotic substances curled through the dim lighting, creating an atmosphere thick with danger and opportunity. Tonight was different from the usual crowd of smugglers and pirates. Tonight, the Crimson Syndicate had called a meeting that would reshape the balance of power across 12 star systems. Zara Voss, the Syndicate's cold-eyed leader, stood at the center of the room. Her cybernetic implants gleamed silver against her pale skin as she surveyed the assembled mercenaries. Each one represented a different species, a different set of deadly skills, and a different reason to hate the emerging human colonies that had been expanding too quickly for comfort. "The humans have grown bold," Zara announced, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a plasma blade. 3 months ago, they were scattered refugees begging for scraps. Now they control 7 systems and their merchant fleets challenge our trade routes. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Korthak warriors clicked their mandibles in approval, while the crystalline Veltar hummed in harmonic resonance. Everyone present had lost profits, territory, or respect because of humanity's rapid expansion. At a corner table, shrouded in shadow, sat a figure that drew nervous glances from even the bravest killers. Keth Morvain was a legend whispered about in a dozen languages across the galaxy. No one knew his species of origin, though his humanoid silhouette suggested he might once have been something close to human himself. What everyone knew was his reputation. In 40 years of mercenary work, he had never failed a contract. His ship, the Silent Death, had been seen entering systems where entire governments vanished overnight. Keth rarely spoke during these gatherings. He would listen, evaluate, and either accept or decline with a simple nod. His fees were astronomical, but his results were guaranteed. Tonight, however, something felt different about his presence. His usual calm demeanor carried an undercurrent of tension that made the air around his table feel charged with electricity. "The humans have established a new colony on Terran Prime," Zara continued, activating a holographic display that showed the planet's orbital defenses. "Intelligence reports suggest they're developing some kind of advanced weapon system. We cannot allow this threat to mature." The hologram rotated slowly, revealing a beautiful blue-green world with 3 moons and a robust defensive grid. Military installations dotted the surface and orbital platforms bristled with energy weapons. It would not be an easy target, but the assembled mercenaries had taken on worse odds. "The contract is simple," Zara explained. "Eliminate the human presence on Terran Prime. Complete extermination. No survivors, no witnesses, no evidence. The fee is 100 million credits, split among participating parties based on contribution." The offer sent a wave of excitement through the cantina. 100 million credits was enough to fund private armies or buy entire space stations. Hands shot up around the room as mercenaries volunteered their services. The Korthak offered their berserker shock troops. The Veltar proposed using their crystalline technology to shatter the planet's core. Even the usually cautious Nethys delegation agreed to provide their cloaking ships. But all eyes eventually turned to the corner table where Keth Morvain sat in silence. His participation would guarantee success and lend credibility to the entire operation. Without him, they were just another group of ambitious criminals. With him, they became an unstoppable force that could reshape galactic politics. Zara approached his table personally, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. "Keth, your reputation precedes you. Will the Silent Death join our cause?" For a long moment, the legendary mercenary said nothing. His fingers drummed once against the metal surface of his table, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed cantina. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a depth that spoke of experiences beyond normal comprehension. "I have seen humans fight," he said quietly, his voice carrying an odd note of warning. "I have watched them when their backs are against the wall and death is certain." The simple statement sent chills through the assembled crowd. This was more than Keth had spoken in public for over a decade, but rather than accepting or declining the contract, he seemed to be offering a caution. "Are you declining?" Zara asked, confusion evident in her voice. Keth stood slowly, his movement causing several mercenaries to instinctively reach for their weapons. At full height, he towered over most of the cantina's occupants, his presence somehow larger than his physical form should have allowed. "I am telling you what I learned in the Outer Rim Wars," he said, each word carefully measured. Never hunt humans. The statement hung in the air like a curse. Several mercenaries laughed nervously, interpreting it as either a joke or the ramblings of someone who had spent too long in deep space. But those who knew Keth's reputation recognized the gravity in his tone. "The humans are weak," protested Grix, a massive Bruthan warrior whose arms ended in natural bone clubs. "They have no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no psychic abilities. They are barely evolved beyond primitive tool users." Keth's gaze fixed on the Bruthan with an intensity that made the larger being step back involuntarily. That is what the hegemony thought. That is what the Zephyrian Empire believed. That is what the Void cultists assumed. He paused, letting the names of those vanished civilizations sink in. Each had once been a galactic superpower. Each had disappeared completely, leaving only ruins and cautionary tales. "Where are they now?" Keth asked softly. Without another word, he walked toward the cantina's exit, his footsteps the only sound in the absolute silence that had fallen over the room. At the doorway, he turned back one final time. "Never hunt humans," he repeated, and then he was gone. The cantina erupted into heated discussion as soon as his presence faded. Some dismissed his warning as the paranoid ramblings of an aging killer. Others wondered if the legendary mercenary had finally lost his edge. But a few, the wisest among them, began to reconsider their participation in what had seemed like a straightforward extermination contract. Zara watched the door long after Keth had disappeared, her mind racing with possibilities. She had expected his participation, not his warning. Now she faced a choice: proceed with a diminished force or investigate why the galaxy's most successful killer had just refused the most lucrative contract of the decade. 3 days after the meeting on Vex Station, the assembled mercenary fleet gathered in the shadow of a dead moon near the Terran Prime system. 47 ships of various configurations floated in formation, their crews eager for the easy money that awaited them. Despite Keth Morvain's strange warning, the lure of 100 million credits had proven too strong to resist. Zara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. The Korthak had brought 12 assault cruisers loaded with their infamous berserker troops. The Veltar contributed 8 crystal ships capable of phasing through solid matter. Even the mysterious Nethys had provided 6 cloaked vessels that could strike without warning. It was enough firepower to level a small planet, let alone eliminate a single human colony. "Begin reconnaissance sweep," she ordered her navigator, a thin Zarathi whose 6 arms danced across the control panels with mechanical precision. "I want to know every defensive position, every ship, every weapon emplacement the humans have placed around their precious world." The fleet's sensor arrays reached across space, probing Terran Prime's defenses with invisible fingers of energy. What they found should have been encouraging. The human orbital platforms numbered only 12, compared to the 47 attacking ships. Their technology appeared standard for a developing species, nothing that suggested the advanced weapons Zara's intelligence reports had mentioned. Most telling of all, the human fleet consisted of only 8 vessels, all smaller than the average mercenary cruiser. "This will be easier than expected," commented Commander Thex, the Korthak war leader whose massive frame was covered in ritual scars. "My warriors grow restless for battle. Perhaps we can finish this before the other crews claim their share of the glory." But as the reconnaissance data flowed in, several details began to disturb the more experienced mercenaries. The human defensive positions were arranged in a pattern that seemed almost random at first glance, yet something about their placement nagged at veteran tacticians. Their ships moved in formations that looked inefficient, but somehow felt deliberate. Most puzzling of all, the orbital platforms appeared to be transmitting constantly to each other and to the surface, creating a communication network far more complex than necessary for simple defense. "There," pointed Veltar navigator singer Melodic Crystal Harmony, her crystalline body chiming softly as she spoke. "Human vessels approach from system edge. Only 3 ships, moving without stealth or apparent urgency." The tactical display highlighted 3 small human vessels approaching the Terran Prime system at standard cruise speed. They made no attempt to hide their presence or alter course when the massive mercenary fleet became visible on their sensors. Instead, they continued their approach with what appeared to be complete indifference to the overwhelming force arrayed against them. "Are they surrendering?" asked Bruthen Captain Grix, confusion evident in his gravelly voice. "No defensive posturing, no evasive maneuvers, no distress signals. Perhaps the humans recognize the futility of resistance." Zara frowned at the display. She had commanded pirates and mercenaries for 2 decades, and she had learned to recognize when something felt wrong. The approaching human ships should have been fleeing in terror or desperately calling for reinforcements. Instead, they seemed to be treating the mercenary fleet as nothing more than an interesting curiosity. "Open communications," she ordered. "Let's hear what the humans have to say before we begin the slaughter." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the lead human vessel. The captain was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything without betraying emotion. She wore a simple uniform bearing insignia that Zara didn't recognize, and her expression suggested she was dealing with a minor administrative matter rather than facing imminent death. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force vessel." "Vigilant," the human said in accented Standard Galactic. "You are in violation of Terran territorial space. Please state your business and intentions." The audacity of the statement sent ripples of laughter through the mercenary fleet's communication channels. A single human, commanding a ship that could be destroyed by any one of the assembled vessels, was demanding explanations from 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous killers. "I am Zara Voss of the Crimson Syndicate," she replied, allowing amusement to color her voice. "My intentions should be obvious, human. You face annihilation. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Captain Chen's expression didn't change. If anything, she seemed mildly disappointed rather than terrified. "I see. Another extermination contract. May I ask who placed the bounty on our colony?" The casual tone of the question unsettled several mercenary captains. They had expected begging, threats, or desperate negotiation attempts. They had not expected what sounded like professional curiosity. "Does it matter?" Zara asked. "You cannot win. Even if your defensive platforms and ships fight perfectly, you are outnumbered 6-1. This is not a battle. It is an execution." "Perhaps," Captain Chen agreed thoughtfully. "Though I should mention that you're not our first visitors with similar intentions. 3 months ago, the hegemony sent a fleet twice this size to eliminate our settlement on New Geneva. 2 months ago, the Zephyrian remnants attempted to claim our mining operations in the Vega system. Last month, the Void Cult Armada tried to sacrifice our research station to their dark gods." She paused as if consulting something off-screen. "All 3 operations failed completely. No survivors from any of the attacking forces." The communication channels fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. 3 major military operations against human targets, all ending in total defeat. The intelligence reports had mentioned human expansion, but said nothing about such devastating military victories. "You're lying," Thex growled, his tusks gleaming in the bridge lighting. "The hegemony commanded thousands of ships. No human force could have destroyed them." "The hegemony commanded thousands of ships," Captain Chen corrected gently. "Past tense. They don't command anything anymore since they no longer exist as a political entity. We found their homeworld 3 weeks after their failed attack. Empty cities, abandoned orbital habitats, no signs of violence or struggle. They simply vanished." The temperature on the Crimson Talon's bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Zara remembered Keth's warning about vanished civilizations and began to understand why the legendary mercenary had chosen to walk away from the most lucrative contract in recent memory. "Impossible," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "The interesting thing about humans," Captain Chen continued, her tone remaining conversational despite the weapons trained on her ship, "is that we don't just fight wars. We end them. Permanently, completely. When someone decides to hunt us, we hunt them back. Not just their fleets or their armies, but everything they are and everything they ever hope to become." The human captain leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, her calm expression showed something deeper. Something that made experienced killers suddenly remember why they had chosen to attack from a safe distance, rather than board human ships directly. "Now," she said quietly, "I'll ask once more. Please state your business and intentions." The silence stretched across the void between the human ships and the mercenary fleet like a held breath. Captain Chen waited patiently while 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous individuals processed what she had just told them. The casual mention of vanished civilizations hung in the space between them like a curse made manifest. Commander Thex was the first to recover from the shock. "Enough games," he snarled, his massive hands gripping the arms of his command chair until the metal groaned. "If humans are so dangerous, why do 3 small ships approach a force that could glass their planet? Where are these legendary fleets that destroyed the hegemony?" "You're looking at them," Captain Chen replied simply. The statement sent confused murmurs through the communication channels. Several mercenary captains began scanning the 3 human vessels more intensively, searching for hidden weapons or concealed ships. The readings showed exactly what they had detected before. 3 lightly armed patrol craft with minimal shielding and standard propulsion systems. Nothing that could threaten even a single mercenary cruiser, let alone a fleet of 47. "Scan deeper," Zara ordered her sensor operator. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know about every bolt and wire on those ships." The Zarathi navigator's 6 arms moved in complex patterns as he complied with her order. Deep scan pulses reached across space, probing the human vessels with enough energy to map their internal structure down to individual components. The results appeared on the tactical display in precise detail, showing 3 ships that were exactly what they appeared to be: small, simple, and completely outgunned. "Scans confirm visual assessment," the navigator reported. "Standard human technology, no exotic weapons, no unusual energy signatures. These vessels pose no significant threat to our formation." But even as he spoke, several mercenaries noticed something that made their experienced instincts whisper warnings. The human ships weren't running. In 4 decades of piracy and mercenary work, every one of them had learned that small ships always ran from large fleets. It was a fundamental law of space combat, as reliable as gravity or the speed of light. Small ships that didn't run were either suicidal, insane, or knew something the bigger ships didn't. "Captain Chen," Zara said carefully, "your ships appear to be standard patrol craft. Your fleet is outnumbered 15 to 1. Your orbital defenses cannot stop this many attackers. Explain to me why you aren't running." The human captain smiled for the first time, an expression that somehow made the bridge of the Crimson Talon feel colder. "Because running would be pointless. You've already made your decision to hunt humans. The location where you die is ultimately irrelevant. Where we die?" Veltar Commander Melodic Crystal Harmony chimed in harmonious confusion. "You speak of our death when you face overwhelming force." "I speak of historical precedent," Captain Chen answered. "Every species that has chosen to hunt humans has followed the same pattern. First contact, misunderstanding, conflict, escalation, and finally extinction. You're currently at the escalation phase." She gestured to something off-screen and the image shifted to show a star chart. Red markers indicated the locations of vanished civilizations, their names floating beside empty space where once mighty empires had controlled hundreds of worlds. The hegemony, the Zephyrian Empire, the Void Cultists, and dozens of others, all gone, all reduced to archaeological mysteries scattered across the galaxy. "The interesting thing about your species," Captain Chen continued, addressing the mercenary fleet collectively, "is that you all make the same mistake. You see humans and you see weakness. Small frames, no natural weapons, no psychic abilities, no extended lifespans. You conclude that we're easy prey." The star chart shifted, showing human colony worlds spreading across the galaxy like a slow-growing infection. Each system showed expansion dates, and the pattern was unmistakable. Wherever humans had been attacked, they had not only survived but grown stronger and claimed larger territories. "What you fail to understand," the human captain said quietly, "is that evolution designed us for a very specific purpose. We are persistence hunters. We don't kill our prey with claws or fangs or psychic powers. We kill our prey by following it until it collapses from exhaustion, and then we keep following it until it stops breathing." Commander Thex laughed, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through his ship's bridge. "Humans tire easily. Your species lacks the stamina for extended warfare. We have fought humans before and found them wanting." "Have you?" Captain Chen asked mildly. "Because our records show that every Korthak fleet that has engaged human forces has been completely destroyed. Not defeated, not driven off, but wiped out so thoroughly that your homeworld no longer knows their fate." The laughter died on Thex's lips. Something cold settled in his stomach as he realized that he couldn't actually remember any successful Korthak victories against human forces. There had been reports of glorious battles and promised treasures, but the fleets that had departed to claim those prizes had never returned. You see, Captain Chen continued, humans don't fight wars the way other species do. When you attack us, you're not just declaring war on our ships or our colonies. You're declaring war on an idea. The idea that humans can be hunted, that we can be intimidated, that we can be made extinct through superior firepower. The star chart shifted again, showing detailed tactical analyses of the vanished civilizations. Each had possessed overwhelming military advantages when they had first encountered humanity. Each had been confident in their ability to eliminate the growing human presence. Each had discovered too late that humans didn't fight fair, didn't honor traditional rules of engagement, and didn't stop fighting until their enemies no longer existed. The hegemony controlled 12,000 star systems, Captain Chen said, highlighting their former territory. They attacked our research station at Kepler 442 with a fleet of 800 ships. Our response was a single vessel carrying 2 human researchers. Within 6 months, the hegemony had ceased to exist as a political entity. Several mercenary captains began requesting tactical data on human military capabilities, but their computer systems returned confusing and contradictory information. Human ships appeared to use standard technology, yet somehow achieved impossible results. Human weapons seemed ordinary, yet left no survivors. Human tactics looked conventional, yet destroyed enemies that outnumbered them by factors of hundreds or thousands. I don't understand, admitted Nethys Shadow Walker Prime, his cloaked form barely visible even on secured channels. How do humans achieve such complete victories with apparent technological parity? Captain Chen's smile widened, and for the first time, the assembled mercenaries caught a glimpse of something predatory lurking behind her calm exterior. The same way our ancestors hunted mammoths with pointed sticks, and the same way we'll hunt every one of you across every star system you've ever called home. She paused, letting the implications sink in. You see, when you hunt humans, you're not just fighting our ships or our soldiers. You're fighting our civilization. Every human who has ever lived, every human who will ever be born, every human idea that has ever been conceived or ever will be conceived. You're fighting our collective unconscious, our species' memory, our genetic imperative to survive. No matter what the cost, the communication channels carried only the sound of stressed life support systems and nervous breathing as the mercenary fleet began to understand what they had gotten themselves into. Now, Captain Chen said pleasantly, shall we begin? The first shots of the battle came not from the human ships but from Commander Thex's flagship. Unable to tolerate Captain Chen's psychological warfare any longer, he ordered his forward batteries to fire on the lead human vessel. Crimson energy beams lanced across the void, striking the Vigilant's shields with enough force to vaporize a small asteroid. The human ship absorbed the impact without visible damage, its shields flaring briefly before returning to normal intensity. What should have been a devastating blow barely registered on the vessel's defensive systems, as if the ship had been designed specifically to withstand Korthak weaponry. Impossible, Thex growled, checking his weapon systems for malfunctions. Those beams should have crippled them. Captain Chen's voice carried a note of disappointment as she responded. Commander Thex of the Korthak 3rd Battle Fleet, your psychological profile indicates an inability to accept tactical disadvantage, leading to premature aggression and poor strategic decisions. This behavior contributed to the destruction of 17 Korthak fleets over the past 2 years. The casual mention of 17 destroyed fleets sent shockwaves through the communication channels. That represented nearly half of the Korthak military's total strength, all lost in conflicts that their homeworld had apparently never been informed about. How do you know about classified Korthak operations? Thex demanded, his voice rising to a roar that made his bridge crew step back involuntarily. We know about all of your operations, Captain Chen replied calmly. Every species represented in your fleet has engaged human forces multiple times over the past 5 years. Every engagement has ended in complete enemy annihilation. Every attacking force has been destroyed so thoroughly that their homeworlds never learned what happened to them. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The question you should be asking is not how we know about your military activities. The question you should be asking is why none of you knew about ours. Zara felt ice forming in her veins as the implications became clear. If humans had been systematically destroying major military fleets for years, and if those losses had been covered up or explained away, then every intelligence assessment about human capabilities was worthless. Every tactical analysis, every strategic evaluation, every assumption about human weakness was based on deliberately falsified information. Impossible, she whispered. But even as she spoke, she remembered dozens of missing fleets, unexplained communication blackouts, and reports of training accidents that had claimed entire battle groups. What if none of those had been accidents? The tactical display suddenly began showing new contacts. Ships were appearing throughout the system, not arriving from hyperspace but simply becoming visible as if they had been there all along. Human vessels of unknown configuration materialized near asteroid belts, behind planetary bodies, and within the outer system's debris fields. They had been hidden so effectively that the combined sensor arrays of 47 ships had failed to detect them. Stealth technology, breathed Nethys Shadowwalker Prime, his own cloaked vessel suddenly feeling inadequate. But how did they mask energy signatures from this many ships? They didn't, Captain Chen explained. You detected every human ship in this system. Your computers simply classified them as asteroids, debris, or sensor ghosts. Human technology doesn't hide from your sensors. It makes your sensors lie to you. The newly revealed human fleet numbered over 300 vessels, ranging from patrol craft like the Vigilant to massive ships that dwarfed anything in the mercenary formation. They moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the attackers in a sphere of firepower that made escape impossible. But rather than attacking immediately, they simply waited, as if giving their prey time to understand the hopelessness of their situation. "This is Rear Admiral Martinez aboard the TDF Retribution," a new voice announced over the communication channels. "All mercenary vessels will power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that resists will be destroyed. Any ship that attempts to flee will be hunted across the galaxy until its crew dies of old age or despair, whichever comes first." The casual certainty in the Admiral's voice was more terrifying than any threat. He spoke as if the outcome of the battle had already been decided, as if the 47 mercenary ships were nothing more than salvage waiting to be collected. Several captains began demanding explanations from their intelligence sources. How had 300 human ships been positioned in the system without anyone detecting them? How had human agents infiltrated secure communications to learn about the contract on Terran Prime? How had humans acquired detailed psychological profiles on mercenary commanders they had supposedly never encountered? "The answer is simpler than you think," Captain Chen said, somehow monitoring their private communications despite their encryption. "Humans have been watching all of you for years. We've been studying your tactics, learning your weaknesses, and preparing for the day when you would inevitably decide to hunt us." The truth began to dawn on the most perceptive mercenaries. They hadn't been hired to attack a human colony. They had been lured into a trap designed specifically to eliminate the galaxy's most dangerous killers in a single operation. The contract, the intelligence reports, even Zara's sources within the criminal underworld had all been manipulated to bring them to this place at this time. "You orchestrated this," Zara accused, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. "The entire contract was a setup." "Not the entire contract," Captain Chen corrected. "The payment was real. 100 million credits just as promised. Unfortunately, the terms of employment included a clause that none of you read carefully. Complete elimination of the target species. Since the target species was anyone who hunts humans, fulfilling the contract requires eliminating everyone present in this system." The mercenary fleet finally began to react as the full scope of their situation became clear. Weapons powered up, engines roared to life, and desperate captains began plotting escape vectors. But every movement was anticipated, every strategy countered before it could be implemented. The human ships moved like parts of a single organism, responding to threats with inhuman coordination and precision. "How is this possible?" demanded Veltar Commander Melodic Crystal Harmony, her crystalline form resonating with harmonic distress. "No species achieves such tactical unity without psychic links." "You're correct," Admiral Martinez replied. "No single species achieves this level of coordination. But humans aren't fighting you as a single species. We're fighting you as a gestalt entity, comprising every human who has ever lived, every human who will ever live, and every possible human who could ever exist in any conceivable timeline." The explanation made no scientific sense, yet somehow captured the essence of what the mercenaries were facing. It wasn't just a fleet of ships or an army of soldiers. It was the entire weight of human civilization brought to bear against anyone foolish enough to threaten humanity's existence. "Last chance," Captain Chen announced. "Surrender now and face trial for your crimes against humanity. Continue fighting and face extinction so complete that the universe will forget your species ever existed." Commander Thex, driven beyond reason by the revelation of how thoroughly he had been outmaneuvered, screamed orders for a full assault. His ships opened fire with every weapon they possessed, filling the void with enough destructive energy to crack a planet's crust. The human fleet absorbed the barrage without significant damage, their shields and armor apparently designed to withstand exactly the weapons being used against them. Then, with mechanical precision, they began to return fire. The battle that followed defied every principle of space combat that the mercenaries had learned over decades of warfare. Human weapons didn't just destroy their targets, they eliminated them so completely that even the wreckage seemed to fade from existence. Ships that took direct hits didn't explode in the expected burst of flame and debris. Instead, they simply stopped being, as if reality itself had decided they no longer belonged in the universe. Commander Thex watched in growing horror as his elite Korthak fleet was systematically annihilated. His warriors, bred for violence and trained from birth to overcome any enemy through sheer ferocity, found their weapons useless against human vessels that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Every shot they fired was absorbed or redirected, while every human response deleted another piece of his command. "This isn't battle," he growled into his communicator. "This is execution." "Finally," Captain Chen replied, her voice carrying what might have been relief. "You're beginning to understand. This was never going to be a battle, Commander. This is pest control." The casual dismissal of 47 ships and their crews as mere pests sent waves of panic through the remaining mercenary vessels. Several captains attempted to surrender, broadcasting white flag signals and powering down their weapons. The human fleet ignored these gestures completely, continuing their methodical elimination of every non-human ship in the system. "You said we could surrender," protested Bruthan Captain Grix, his massive frame trembling as his ship's hull began to buckle under sustained human fire. "You offered us trials." "That offer expired when Commander Thex opened fire," Admiral Martinez explained patiently. "The window for mercy closed the moment you chose violence over wisdom. Now you face the consequences of hunting an apex predator." The Veltar ships attempted to use their phase-shifting technology to escape through solid matter, believing they could hide within asteroid fields or planetary masses until the battle ended. The human weapons followed them through every dimensional barrier, striking targets that should have been untouchable. Even the Nethys cloaking technology, refined over millennia to achieve perfect invisibility, proved useless against sensors that could track thoughts rather than energy signatures. "How are they targeting cloaked ships?" Nethys Shadowwalker Prime demanded, his voice filled with the first fear he had experienced in centuries of assassination work. "Our stealth fields bend light, sound, and electromagnetic radiation. We should be undetectable. Human hunters don't track their prey by sight or sound," Captain Chen explained with academic detachment. "We track by behavior, by instinct, by the pattern of choices that define how each species responds to existential threat. You hide because hiding is your nature. We find you because finding is ours." As the battle progressed, the surviving mercenaries began to understand that they faced something beyond conventional military force. The human ships moved with perfect anticipation of their tactics, as if the entire engagement had been choreographed in advance. Every desperate maneuver was countered before it began, every strategy neutralized before it could be implemented. Zara, watching her carefully assembled fleet dissolve around her, began to appreciate the true scope of human planning. This wasn't just a trap designed to eliminate mercenary threats. It was a demonstration intended to send a message to every predator species in the galaxy. Hunt humans and face extinction so complete that even the memory of your existence would be erased. "The contract," she said suddenly, a terrible understanding dawning in her mind. "You wrote the contract yourselves. You created the entire situation to lure us here." "Partially correct," Captain Chen acknowledged. "We created the framework and provided the motivation. But the choice to hunt humans was always yours. We simply made sure that choice would be your last." The admission revealed the true sophistication of human strategy. They hadn't just defeated their enemies. They had manipulated them into defeating themselves. Every mercenary in the system had chosen to be here, had volunteered for what they now realized was their own execution. The psychological impact was devastating, destroying not just ships and crews but the very concept that humans could be successfully hunted. "Why?" asked Veltar Commander Melodic Crystal Harmony, her crystalline form cracking under the stress of watching her people die. "Why such elaborate deception? Why not simply reveal your strength and avoid unnecessary conflict?" "Because fear is temporary," Captain Chen replied, her voice carrying the weight of species-wide exhaustion. "Terror fades, intimidation weakens, threats lose their power over time. But legend is eternal. Stories of what happens to those who hunt humans will spread across the galaxy, carried by the few survivors we allow to escape. Those stories will prevent future conflicts far more effectively than any display of force." The realization that some survivors were intended to escape sent desperate hope through the remaining mercenaries. Several captains began broadcasting their willingness to spread word of human capabilities, promising to warn other species away from any anti-human activities. But the selection of survivors didn't seem to be based on cooperation or promises. Instead, the human fleet was carefully choosing which ships to destroy completely and which to damage but leave functional. The pattern seemed random at first, but gradually revealed itself to be based on psychological profiles and species characteristics. They were selecting survivors who would tell the most compelling stories, whose personalities would ensure the widest spread of fear throughout their respective civilizations. 10 ships will be permitted to leave this system, Admiral Martinez announced as the battle entered its final phase. Their crews will carry word of what they have witnessed to every corner of the galaxy. They will explain to their governments, their military leaders, and their people exactly what happens to those who choose to hunt humans. The arbitrary nature of survival added another layer of psychological warfare to the engagement. Mercenaries who had spent their lives controlling their own destinies found themselves helpless passengers in someone else's narrative. They couldn't fight their way to survival, couldn't negotiate their way to safety, couldn't even choose their own deaths with dignity. As her own ship came under sustained fire, Zara finally understood why Keth Morvain had walked away from the contract. The legendary mercenary hadn't been afraid of human weapons or human ships. He had been afraid of human psychology, of a species that could turn their enemy's own nature against them with such devastating effectiveness. "Never hunt humans," she whispered, echoing his warning as her ship's hull began to fail. But even as she spoke, she realized that the warning was already too late. By gathering here, by choosing to hunt humans, they had already sealed not just their own fate but the fate of every species they represented. The demonstration wouldn't end with their deaths. It would begin with them, spreading across the galaxy like a virus of fear, until every potential predator understood the fundamental truth that Keth had tried to share. Humans weren't prey. They were the ultimate predator, patient enough to wait for their enemies to reveal themselves and thorough enough to eliminate every threat permanently. And now, thanks to 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous individuals, everyone would know it. 6 months after the battle at Terran Prime, the galaxy had become a very different place. The 10 surviving mercenary ships had indeed spread word of what they had witnessed, but their accounts were so horrific that many species initially dismissed them as trauma-induced fantasies. The idea that humans could systematically eliminate 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous vessels without suffering a single casualty seemed impossible to civilizations that measured strength by military hardware and territorial control. The truth became undeniable when follow-up investigations found no trace of the destroyed ships. Not wreckage, not debris fields, not even the exotic particles that should have remained after such massive explosions. The mercenary vessels hadn't just been destroyed. They had been edited out of existence so completely that even their past presence in the universe became questionable. Keth Morvain sat in his private cabin aboard the Silent Death, reading intelligence reports that confirmed his worst fears. 3 major governments had fallen in the past month, not through military conquest but through simple abandonment. When their populations learned what had happened to those who hunted humans, entire civilizations had chosen exile over the possibility of attracting human attention. The Korthak hegemony's remaining territories had fragmented into a dozen minor states, each desperately trying to distance themselves from their species' history of aggression. The Veltar Collective had dissolved their military entirely, converting their crystal ships into deep space exploration vessels designed to avoid any possibility of conflict. Even the Nethys Empire, masters of shadow and subterfuge, had publicly announced their withdrawal from all activities that might be construed as hostile to human interests. But the most significant change had occurred within the mercenary community itself. The galaxy's freelance killers, raiders, and soldiers of fortune had effectively ceased to exist as a profession. No one was willing to accept contracts that might bring them into conflict with human forces, and the few who remained active limited themselves to conflicts between non-human species in systems far from any human presence. Keth's communicator chimed with an incoming message marked with the highest priority encryption. He activated the secure channel, expecting another client seeking his services for some impossible task. Instead, he found himself looking at Captain Sarah Chen, the human officer whose words had preceded the destruction of nearly 4 dozen ships. "Mr. Morvain," she said with the same calm professionalism she had displayed during the battle. "Thank you for accepting this communication. I hope we can speak frankly." "I assume this isn't a social call," Keith replied, his voice carefully neutral. Even through the encrypted channel, he felt the weight of her attention like a physical presence. "You walked away from the Terran Prime contract," Captain Chen observed. "Despite the enormous fee and your reputation for accepting any challenge, you chose not to participate in what should have been a straightforward extermination mission. We're curious about your reasoning." Keth considered his answer carefully. 40 years of mercenary work had taught him to recognize when he was being evaluated, and everything about this conversation suggested he was undergoing some kind of test. "I've seen humans fight," he said finally. "Not your ships or your weapons, but your species' approach to warfare. Most civilizations fight to win. Humans fight to end, permanently." Captain Chen nodded approvingly. "An astute observation." "You've encountered human forces before?" "Twice," Keth admitted. "Both times I was hired to eliminate what intelligence reports described as isolated human settlements. Both times I found myself facing something that defied every tactical assessment I had ever trusted. The first encounter had been 15 years ago in the Outer Rim, where a small human research station had supposedly been developing illegal bioweapons. Keth had approached the facility expecting to find a few dozen scientists and minimal security. Instead, he had discovered a fully operational military base with defensive systems that seemed designed specifically to counter his ship's unique capabilities. "You retreated," Captain Chen said, somehow knowing details of an engagement that had never been officially recorded. "I adapted," Keth corrected. "When predator meets apex predator, survival requires recognizing which category you belong to." The second encounter had occurred only 5 years ago, when he had been contracted to eliminate a human trade convoy that was allegedly disrupting established shipping routes. The 3 cargo vessels had indeed been unarmed and unescorted, exactly as advertised. But their crews had fought with a coordination and ferocity that suggested they had been expecting his attack for months. "You realize that human civilians are soldiers. Human traders are intelligence assets and human researchers are weapons designers," Captain Chen said with what might have been approval. "Most species never grasp the integrated nature of human civilization. Most species compartmentalize their society," Keth agreed. "Humans militarize it. Every human is a potential combatant. Every human installation is a potential fortress. Every human interaction is a potential intelligence operation." The conversation was interrupted by a priority alert from the Silent Death's sensor array. Keth's ship was detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system, far too large and numerous to be explained by normal stellar activity. When he activated the tactical display, he found himself surrounded by the same impossible sight that had greeted the mercenary fleet at Terran Prime. Ships were materializing from what had appeared to be empty space, revealing themselves with the same casual demonstration of superiority that had preceded the destruction of Zara's fleet. Hundreds of human vessels now filled the system, their presence making it clear that this conversation was taking place entirely on their terms. "An impressive display," Keth said calmly, though his hands moved to his ship's defensive controls. "Am I about to join the mercenaries who hunted humans?" "That depends entirely on your next decision," Captain Chen replied. The Terran Defense Force has a proposition for someone with your particular skills and experience. The offer that followed was unlike anything Keth had encountered in 4 decades of mercenary work. The humans weren't hiring him to kill anyone or destroy anything. Instead, they wanted him to serve as a messenger, carrying word of humanity's capabilities to species and governments that might be considering anti-human activities. "You want me to become a herald of human supremacy," he said, understanding the psychological implications of the offer. "We want you to become a voice of practical wisdom," Captain Chen corrected. "Your reputation for never failing a contract gives your words weight throughout the mercenary community. When Keth Morvain says that hunting humans is impossible, people listen." The payment offered for this service was modest compared to his usual fees, but it came with something far more valuable: immunity. As long as he served as humanity's unofficial ambassador to the galaxy's criminal underworld, he would be protected from the fate that awaited anyone who chose to oppose human interests. "And if I decline?" Keth asked. "Then you'll be permitted to leave this system safely," Captain Chen assured him. "But you'll do so knowing that every human in the galaxy will remember that you had the opportunity to help prevent future conflicts and chose not to take it." The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable. Refusing wouldn't make him an immediate enemy, but it would mark him as someone who couldn't be trusted to make rational decisions about human affairs. In a galaxy where humans had just demonstrated their ability to eliminate threats with terrifying efficiency, being marked as untrustworthy was effectively a death sentence. "Very well," Keth said after a long moment of consideration. "I accept your offer, but I have one condition." "Name it." "When I tell other mercenaries why they should never hunt humans, I want to be able to speak from personal experience. Show me what happened to the ships at Terran Prime. Show me what you did to 47 of the galaxy's most dangerous killers." Captain Chen smiled, and for the first time, Keth glimpsed something in her expression that explained why entire civilizations were choosing exile over the possibility of human retaliation. "Mr. Morvain," she said pleasantly, "I thought you'd never ask." As the silent death was escorted toward a massive human vessel that shouldn't have been able to exist according to known physics, Keth reflected on the irony of his situation. He had spent his entire career as the galaxy's most feared mercenary, but now he was about to become its most important teacher. The lesson he would carry to every corner of known space was simple, elegant, and absolutely true. Never hunt humans, because when humans hunt back, they don't stop until their prey is extinct.